Dawson City Yukon. What a spectacular place. It sits at the confluence of the Yukon River and the Klondike River, has two museums which we will visit, and it's the starting point for not only the Dempster Highway, but taking a ferry across the Yukon starts the top of the world highway on your way to Alaska. Haha, Chicken, Alaska. Let's do this. All right, so we stayed out at the free gold panning claim number 6. A great boondocking spot, actually. We really enjoyed it. And it rained most of the night, and it's going to rain on and off today, but it'll be okay. It'll make for some cool clouds when we get up to the dome. What's it called? The Midnight Dome, I think it's called. You'll see that in a little while. But this morning, we are off to downtown to fill up our water tank and walk around the History Museum a little bit, or the Visitor Center, I guess, first. And then we're going to come back and tour Dredge number 4. That should be a good time. Okay, because of the permafrost, here's what we've noticed. 90% of the roads in Dawson City are not paved, and the houses are built up off the ground on stilts at least a few feet. I'll talk about that more when I show you the kissing houses shortly. So when was the last time you walked down a street in a city that was dirt? This is Main Street. So before we went over to the Visitor Center, which is also a little bit of a history museum, to learn more about this dredge that we're going to go tour, we had to get some ice cream. I mean, come on. Ice cream shops in the Yukon are amazing. Uh-oh, the dogs are trying to steal the ice cream. Look at that menu. While we were in the ice cream shop, I noticed this paper hanging on the wall talking about the Klondike Highway being closed due to the fire. Yep, that's the fire that disrupted our travel over the last few days and kept a lot of the traffic off the Dempster. Dredge number 4, and that's what it does. It dredges up the river bottom, and then it spits it out as a gigantic scar on the earth.
It was these old hands, the sourdoughs, who knew that contrary to popularity, there was much more to getting gold than simply sticking a pen into a rushing stream.
It's an incredible diorama, I think that's what they're called. There's Dawson City. And the Kino in the background. It's really cool. It's kind of in a round circle here in the museum. So in the visitor center, they have a really cool model of Dredge number 4. That is really neat. There's what we see when we drive up to it. It finally stopped raining. We left the visitor center and headed out toward Dredge number 4, a National Historic Site of Canada. We wanted to learn more about high-level gold mining. You can go out there on your horse and use a pick and a shovel, or you can sign on with a dredge. I think there were 20 of them or so. You'll learn in a little while, and you'll probably go deaf.
So I'm going to get into a bit of the history of how these got up here, and then we're going to talk about how they worked, and then we're going to do an obligatory legal safety thing, and then we're going to get on board, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So in 1896, gold is discovered here on Bonanza Creek. At the time it was called Rabbit Creek, and it was discovered by a group of people who had no interest in discovering gold themselves. There had been prospectors in the region for about 20 years. They were kind of a butterfly effect of the California gold rush of 1849. This brings miners to the west coast of North America, and slowly since 1849 they've been making their way up the spine of North America, and they're finally in what is now the Yukon Territory by the 1870s. They've been prospecting around for quite some time.
This is quite the piece of machinery. Huge. It's actually the tallest building in the Yukon if it's sitting on dry land. It cost $250,000 to purchase in 1912, and it cost $1 million to ship it here to the Dawson City area.
Are advocating for permission to build hydroelectric dams, and they both received permission to do so from the Minister of the Interior on the condition that they provide all the excess power not being utilized for their dredging operations to the city of Dawson at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
Very flexible term if you visited the grocery store. It's all being sent piecemeal, much like an IKEA set, all the way up here. So, to do so, they're loading it onto the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States, which is finishing off at Seattle, being loaded onto steamboats, which are sent to Skagway, and then being loaded onto the White Pass Railway, which was completed in 1901. So the White Pass Railway is carrying all of this to Whitehorse, where it is loaded onto paddle boats, where it is sent downriver to Dawson City. Once it arrives at Dawson City, all of this is being loaded onto carts pulled by horse teams, or a narrow gauge railway, and is being deposited out at the Ogilvie Bridge, which you drove past to get here, at the site of construction. Now, between purchase and operation of these dredges is a year and a half, and permitting today's could never permit that. And it's very efficient. They really wanted the gold. Now, the reason we're talking about this, besides this reasonably sized reduction gear, is that this is 15 feet in diameter, which means that it's not fitting through any railway tunnels on the White Pass Railway, which means that it's being carried by steamship to the mouth of the Yukon River in St. Michael's, Alaska, and the Bering Sea, which is accessible 3 months of the year. Once it's at St. Michael's, it's being loaded onto paddle boats and being sent upstream some 1,700 kilometers or 1,200 miles to Dawson City before, again, it's being loaded onto horse teams.
So there's your dryer with 3 tons of rock and hopefully some gold going around, and the gold and the small fines would fall through the holes. And then all the rock that is unused would be going out this conveyor belt to the back to create the huge piles of rock that we see all around this area. I'll talk about the noise levels again here in a minute, but can you imagine 20 of these out in the woods? He said they were so noisy that you could hear them for miles, and people complained in town and would often leave because they were so noisy. So once you get done with the tour, you can walk down to where I'm going to call them the scoops. Each one of these weighed 1.5 tons, and they could scoop 1.5 tons worth of material into that hopper that was kind of like your clothes dryer. And he said, imagine 1.5 tons of rock and gravel and dirt being loaded into that metal hopper, which turns around just like your dryer. He said, just imagine what it's like when you, how did he put it? If you have a quarter or a toonie or a loonie in your dryer, how noisy that is, multiply that by whatever. And that's how noisy it was back then. And there was no such thing as OSHA, and there was no such thing as hearing protection back then. So there were some good stories, well worth the time to go in and go through that, especially after seeing all the tailings, pilings around here. That's what they're from, is these dredges. There was anywhere from 12 to 19 dredges working in the early 1900s. They don't know how many because the head of the board, who was in charge of the bookkeeping for the company, did such a horrible job of bookkeeping that they are not positive how many dredges there were. That was interesting. Also, I said inside there that it cost $250,000 to buy it. It cost almost $1 million to ship it up here, is what he said. That was in 1912. In 1913, they covered all of that cost plus all of the labor and electricity and everything else. So very profitable in the way that it dug. Discovery claim, where it is possible that they discovered the first gold in the Klondike. And there's the family. And we're gonna go find a geocache that's located here. And the answer to a question inside it is gonna be found on that board, I think. Huh, big guy? This walk really shows the dredging and what dredging did and the tailings that were left behind. There are miles and miles of this up and down all the creeks and all the valleys here and the trees that have been growing into it. This walkway is built on top of the tailings lines. It's pretty incredible. I understand when you fly into Dawson City by air, you can see these for miles and miles on each side of the airplane. Hey, is there somebody down here panning for gold? Huh, Brink? So this is Bonanza Creek, where they think the first discovery was made. It's all been dredged so many times they're not sure. It sure is a beautiful area. Lots of old historic buildings still in town, including the Kissing buildings. You'll see them in just a second here. They were not built on stilts. They were not built up off the ground. So the heat from inside the buildings would melt the permafrost and cause them to sink into the mud, and hence they would lean into each other or kiss. Here we go, Corinne. We need to stay here. Diamond Tooth Gertie's 3 can shows nightly. I wonder if Brinkley's allowed inside. So on one of the mountaintops overlooking Dawson, we've got a beautiful viewpoint of the city and a viewpoint of the Klondike River coming together with the Yukon. The Klondike being very clean, coming down out of the hills. The Yukon with all of its sediment and mud. I guess sediment would be the proper word. And then as we go around here to the south, we see the mining area that we stayed in last night with the dredge number 4. And then all of this tailings and just the piles and piles of rock left by all the different dredge machines back from 1912 through 1960. And it goes on for miles. each one of those huge dredge machines would move well less than a mile per year in tearing the earth apart to find gold. Sorry for the haze. We've got wildfires all over up here this summer, and so it's hard to see, but there's the Bonanza River coming down. Well, it's coming down next to the road, so we really can't see it. And into the Klondike. And then over here on the other side of the Yukon, there's a road. Maybe we can see it right there. That is the top of the World Highway. So we'll be getting on the ferry tomorrow to cross over to the other side of the Yukon River. And we'll get on the top of the World Highway, which is going to take us over into there. But it's my understanding there's a beautiful vantage point, beautiful viewpoint down to the city of Dawson from there. So we will be pulling over and taking some video and some pictures from there tomorrow. We hung around on the front part of Midnight Dome. There's a nice little parking area there, and you can walk around and actually do a little bit of hiking. And then we pulled around to the backside where there's a fantastic boondock site. I actually talked to an RCMP officer who has no problem with people staying up there. It was a quiet night, and I could only imagine, if the sun had set, what beautiful views of the stars, the Milky Way, maybe the Northern Lights. But of course the sun didn't set, so we grabbed our dinner that we had picked up in downtown and walked up the hill, found a beautiful picnic area, and just relaxed. And there was a little bit of a breeze, so the bugs weren't even very bad, which really helped out. That was nice, so we didn't have to have our bug shirts on. And we got some great views of the Yukon River, including the Yukon looking north, which is always fun. Yep, we remembered the forks. Most of our meals, we would pick up groceries and cook at the rig, but boy, every once in a while, it was sure fun to get a nice meal cooked for us at a local restaurant, and this one was fantastic, a Vietnamese restaurant in downtown Dawson. Over here on top of the mountain overlooking Dawson City, there's a big storm out over the top of the World Highway looking straight west toward Alaska. We got the Yukon River below us running north, which I'm still weirded out by. And there's something in the woods over here making noise. Not sure what it is. Maybe it's a grizzly bear. Maybe it's a Brinkley and Corinne. Hey guys. About 11 o'clock, I was reading a book and started hearing thunder, so I wanted to get up and see what was going on. Again, just rain all over the place, and we were going to be up there on those hills for the next few days, so we hoped that it wouldn't follow us, but it sure made for some beautiful photography here. I also wanted to get the drone up one last time and really get some good views of the river before we got to the other side. So I got to see the ferry going across, see the storms a little bit more. Just wanted to get the opportunity to really document this area. It's so beautiful. Another view here of where the Klondike River comes together with the Yukon. That is really neat. And there's a real good shot of the start of the top of the World Highway where the ferry brings you across and drops you off, and you kind of head north there for a couple seconds and then turn south, and then it goes west for a few days. Well, good morning. We woke up this morning to quite a spectacle. Quite a different view of the valley. There's downtown Dawson, where the Yukon and the Klondike come together. And then over to the top of the World Mountains. That's pretty cool. Looking north up the Yukon River also looks a little different this morning. Absolutely incredible. And here's back behind where we camped. That's kind of cool. Time to head down into town and do some exploring. Had the opportunity to walk around the Dawson City Klondike Museum a little bit. Very interesting stuff. A mix of past and present. An old sled dog harness. Beautiful display of the old and the new, or I guess mostly the old. Whoops, one of the dredges.
Yeah. It's not here, it's in storage. If you ask Scott, she can take it.
And then the paddles and the snowshoes, I like those. Those are cool.
She hates her now.
Really?
I'll show you or I'll get Scott to send you a picture. Yeah.
Down by the Yukon River in downtown Dawson, they've got this really cool map, which I just love because it's so hard for me to understand that a river starts down here and goes north instead of just right out here to the sea. But there's a giant mountain range right there in the way. So we started following the Yukon at Whitehorse and then up to Carmack's, Dawson City, and now we'll be crossing over and staying south of it. But it goes all the way over straight west basically, which is kind of cool. And then we were up there at Tuck. Yeah. But you can see where the Klondike River and the Yukon River come together here. I described that earlier, I believe. Since it wasn't raining today anymore, we got a chance to walk around downtown Dawson, walk around the dike a little bit. We got to spend a little time looking at the EKKO, an old riverboat that's now a museum. Then we spent a little bit more time in downtown and went over to the Dawson Fire Hall and Museum, saw all kinds of really cool old rigs and one really cool old fireman. We had a good time at the Fire Museum.
Firefighters. No government money, no grants, we paid this out of our back pockets, which is why we had that beautiful little red box there.
Yeah.
And that big red trailer behind me. The engine would be pulled with 2 horses, 3 firemen on board. You have a driver, and at the rear is an engineer and a stoker. We're going to run the engine. We have it back here, the wood box. The bottom of the boiler, we have our fire box. We start off there with kindling and bacon grease. Bacon grease burns very fast, very hot. Smells good in the morning. It's going to heat up water in the boiler. Inside the boiler, we have a series of tubes and pipes with water in them. Fire heats up the water in the tubes, produces steam in the steam chamber at the top. That steam, under pressure, will go into and run 2 engines here, which are pushing the pistons up and down into 2 pumps. Water in, water up, same on the other side. Some width was left on there, a lot of research. When it comes time to restore this, all that be reapplied. Estimated cost of restoration on this one right now, just pushing 400,000. I did mention that little red box over there. Now the engines go by sizes, which number 1 to 5.
What a great museum. What a great storyteller he turned out to be. We learned a lot about the old pumpers and the importance of the fire department in an old, remote mining town, gold town. Everything was built of wood, and there were some massive fires back in the day. So we got back in the Moose, and it was time to make our way out of Dawson. I wanted to drive around the city one last time. It's such a unique city. All the buildings built up a couple of feet off the ground, the dirt roads, the old buildings with some of their original names, and just thinking back to all of the gold rush folks that came and built this town back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, all the gold that built this town. And the history. It was just so cool to go through those two museums. I know I only shared a little bit of them here, but they were really well worth the time. So we drove around, said goodbye to Dawson City. Hopefully we will be back because that was really a unique town. And then we drove a little bit north to get in line for the ferry going across the Yukon River, which is going to take us to the top of the world highway. We're really looking forward to a couple of days on that, boondocking all by ourselves. Probably won't see anybody for quite a while. Hopefully we'll see some wildlife. Hopefully it won't rain too much, although boy, it looks like it's just been raining over there nonstop for the last few days. We've got a few geocaches to find, and then we will cross into Alaska. Alaska, my 50th state, so that'll be fun to be able to get that off the bucket list. And then on to chicken. So the next video will be Top of the World Highway and all things Chicken, Alaska. Here we come. Thanks for joining us. Take care. Safe travels.